If you go back to when COVID just started and there was a huge shortage of masks and gloves and everything, we were doing all kinds of, everybody's doing crazy stuff to try to find them. So we had this huge shortage. Then all of a sudden they showed up and now everybody's got a glut of gloves. I mean, I'm on the board of a company. We've got 12 containers of nitrile gloves if anybody needs any, but there are hundreds of containers of nitrile gloves all sitting around. So we went from shortage to a glut. And right now, if you look at, and I will come back to specifically, what's going on in facility management, but if you look at the car thing now, there's no cars because there's no chips, right? But the manufacturers are still making cars, but they're waiting for a chip. So right now we have a shortage of new cars, right? And as soon as these chips show up at the end of 22, there's going to be a glut of cars and everybody's going to be offering all these incentives to go buy a new car. So the point I'm trying to make, where I think a business person will get a little better perspective, think of a pendulum going back and forth. When demand and supply are balanced, that pendulum just sort of sits there, wobbles a little bit, but COVID broke it. So we've got these wild swings. And so the problem's not going to go, you can't even look at it by a specific commodity type. As an example, what ends up happening is let's just take paper, simple example. But there's a lot of specialty papers that are used in this industry. So you can have their major paper producers doing everything just right, but they need a certain chemical they put into it for a specialty material. And that supplier declares a force majeure, which says, sorry, the world changed. I can't get it from my supplier. And so it could be 3 steps back. So when a distributor is looking at the manufacturer going, when can you start shipping this stuff to me? The manufacturer really doesn't know because it's like hand-to-hand combat every day. So when you start thinking about this, when you start looking at complex products or assembled products, a lot of the people that make, I call them motors with sticks, but the people make cleaning equipment and all the fancy stuff that they're doing, they could have everything right, but there's just one little part they need. So they got all this material that's not quite finished goods inventory because it's missing something. So it's going to take this shortage is not going to just quote go away or fade away. It's going to go away with this pendulum oscillating back and forth until it settles down again. I mean, any economy that gets more efficient also gets more brittle. I mean, if we were subsistence fishermen in Bangladesh, we would never even know that there was a supply chain shortage or anything else that's going on because it just doesn't matter. So when I look at the cleaning industry, what's happened is right now, a lot of distributors, they're placing orders for the same product with 3 different manufacturers just to see who could ship it. And so now if you're a manufacturer, you see all this demand coming in, but it's not real because they're going to cancel it with the other 2 guys when it gets there. So what we've done in this industry, because we have so many small lifestyle businesses that are very entrepreneurial, we've got all this goofy demand that's floating around, and a manufacturer's got to be making decisions about which one that they support and what's real and what's not real. And right now, I would say that there's just a lot of fuzziness and people are frustrated. There's also some manufacturers in your business that are starting to say, if you're going to give me an order for this, it's non-cancelable, right? And all of a sudden saying, well, what? So the key thing here when you're trying to get a hold of this is to basically just say, you need to be much closer to your supply chain partners. You need to be sharing more data. This whole arm's length that we're negotiating, looking for the best price, those people are going to find they don't have any product. That pendulum thing, I think, is going to be with us well through 22 and perhaps even into 23. I really enjoyed seeing the change that Jay Powell did when the Fed did their pivot here, and they announced that we're going to be looking at rate increases. And we're in a period of inflation right now, and it's pretty, I mean, and some of the stuff actually, and almost, if I look at almost all the categories in the industry, that we're having very, very high increases in all the things that we typically, in the old days, pre-COVID, a manufacturer would put a price increase in and they wondered whether or not it would stick, right? I mean, that's how solid it was, but now everything's broken. Manufacturers at the show were telling me that doing a distributor meetings like Groundhog Day today, because they're all the same. You've got to stop passing on these price increases because I can't pass them on. And when are you going to finally deliver product to me? And it really is like Groundhog Day, and they just don't know where they're going to go. So when what I'm starting to see is that the people that are more aligned with their suppliers and share more real data are doing a whole lot better. Because if you think about it, we've had a reliable supply chain. Just in time means almost late, right? We had very known quality, so we didn't get surprises, right? And so if you think about cost, schedule, and technical performance, I knew that schedule and technical performance were rock solid. So everybody spent years, decades negotiating price. And it's kind of like you raise a plate of food on one side too high, all the peas fall off. And so we really pushed this price thing, and the smart guys have said, I need to be able to get a consistent source of supply. And so they're trying to share information. And the people that have done the super cheap stuff back and forth, all of a sudden, since there's limited product and more demand, they're not going to get any product. There's a bunch of small contract cleaners that have been going from pillar to post back and forth, and they're not going to be able to get the stuff that they need. I mean, a lot of the key suppliers in your industry, they have more demand than they have product, and they got to figure out who to get it to. And so it's going, if you will, to partners. I mean, there's a lesson from many years ago where UPS went on strike, and everybody was shocked and awe. And so everybody calls up FedEx, right, and DHL, and they only have limited capacity. They said, well, you didn't do anything with this before. Now you want me to take care of you? Sorry, good luck, Charlie. You're on your own. And so people started to think, I need to be spending some money with these different guys so I have some coverage. And your industry is learning this the hard way right now. I mean, there's a lot of whining. And when you take the whining out, there's real problems because people are still trying to take care of customers. And especially with all the COVID issues we have going, clean is getting really, really critical for a lot of people. If you look at the improvements that GBAC has made and these other things that are happening, people still need to get all the chemicals and the supplies, and you can't say GBAC certified if you don't have the materials. I mean, so it's a serious deal, but I think people have to be a little more open and stop. Negotiating is getting in the way of being effective. I had an opportunity to spend an afternoon with a billionaire who's pretty old. He's like in his 90s. And we were talking about inflation. And I remembered as a young man the misery index with the Carter years and all that. And we were talking about inflation. And inflation is actually a tax on wealth, and it makes your money worth less. And he made most of his fortune during all those crazy times. And I said, well, so how do you make all this money in an inflationary environment? And he said, you have to do two things. He said, you have to watch very closely for changes. And when you start to see a change, you need to react very quickly. He said, in periods of inflation, he said, there's an entire generation that's never had that experience. And what happens, the people that learn how to recognize these things quickly or look for small changes and then react quickly instead of waiting, they're the ones that actually did really well in an inflationary environment. And I mean, to me, the saving grace in this industry is that we still have to clean. This is a recession-proof industry, quote unquote, but it's still a supply chain dependent industry. So if I'm a distributor, I'm going to be talking to my customers and say, don't be scheduling orders for rush ASAP delivery. You give me, and I mean, there's several distributors that will probably be listening to what you're doing here that are already doing this, where they tell the customer, I'm going to you to take 80% of your A items that I deliver every month, and I'm going to send that to you every month. And I'll pay the freight on that and everything else. You can add to it anytime you want. I'll ship once a week, whatever you want. But you can't change that order without giving me 30 days notice. Everything else you can do the fill in. And I saw this with a healthcare distributor. A hospital called up, said I need 80 respirators. And he said, I can give you 20. And he said, people are going to die if you don't give me 80. And he said, I can only give you 20, but I'll give you 20 every month. And you can start to backfill the rest of it. We have to get customers to behave differently. What do they need, not what do they want? And then the other thing, if distributors, go back to your supplier and focus on the key suppliers that you know you're going to be aligned with going forward. And you need to put your time and back them in, and you're going to take some pain, but we're sharing the pain. We're all in the same foxhole right now. So there's two kinds of guys in a foxhole. There's the one that you trust to watch your back, and the one that you say run over there so they draw enemy fire. And you want to be the guy that's watching the back of your suppliers and your customers. So it takes much more honesty. I mean, one of the things I see distributor after distributor, and I don't care, I mean, really, really big distributors as well, the big names in the industry, people don't use their purchasing supply chain technology that they bought properly. If you really want to look at the software that everybody's bought, their ERP systems, and everybody's using pretty much the same ERP systems. There's a handful of the regular suspects, but they all have parameter settings. They all have replenishment paths. They all have dynamic scheduling and safety stock. Most people don't use that. The way I tell as a consultant that somebody's using it is if over 75% of the line items you order from suppliers are computer generated, no human touches it, then you're using your system. Most distributors are down probably around 30% because old Herbie that's been there 30 years, so I'm going to add a little more A items here so I make free pay. And the systems will actually calculate all that, and they're not using what they paid for. So, I mean, to me, one of the things, if they get their fundamentals right, probably a third to half of this problem would just go away. But they need to put the time into it and get somebody to actually know. Most distributors don't even know there's a parameter screen on adjusting their supply chain. And every one of these ERP packages has it. So you don't need to buy more software. You don't need to put more, just use what you paid for. The classic example is every business, you open that closet and covered in dust is this PBX switch for the phone and all these little wires, and they're all covered with dust. And everybody just looks at it and closes the door because they're afraid to touch it because it might break and they don't know how to fix it. But most of these systems will actually provide caller ID. So a customer calls up, right? And I can see the customer history on my screen before I even answer the phone, right? But nobody wants to RTFM, which loosely translated means read the friendly manual.